So I think what's interesting is contrasting this SONA of 2021 with President Ramaphosa's inaugural speech in 2018. That was a moment of profound joy and hope for many people. I wasn't one of them, but many people felt that we were about to turn a corner as a country. It was the moment that he announced the new dawn, that he announced the Tumamina strategy or ethos. It was a moment where standing ovations punctuated the speech. It was a moment when people were convinced that South Africa was just months away from a radically new trajectory. And when you contrast that moment against this one, as President Ramaphosa stood before an eerily silent parliamentary chamber, as you heard the muted applause, you even heard President Ramaphosa at times saying, you don't seem to be impressed, joking with his parliamentary caucus. It really brought home just how far President Ramaphosa's political star has fallen, but also just what a different situation the country is in. And this speech comes at a time when South Africa is at one of its lowest ebbs in democratic history, from the devastation caused by the COVID pandemic to the economic desolation, the poverty, the unemployment, the inequality. And President Ramaphosa was almost giving a speech to a nation in mourning, whereas his first SONA was a speech to a nation in jubilation. And so there was something very interesting about how this speech contrasted and compared with the speech that really set up the Ramaphosa presidency. And it seems now that President Ramaphosa is really entering the hardest moment that his presidency has yet seen, where all the political capital he had at the inception of his presidency, all the momentum into which he brought his presidency, all the hopes, the dreams that surrounded this presidency are dissipating at a rate of knots, and the president is looking increasingly vulnerable.
Now, at the moment, we are talking about Jacob Zuma in very specific terms, a man who has defied the highest court in the land, the Constitutional Court, a man who is engaged in a tours with the Zondo Commission, a man who argues that not only Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo and his commission, but also the Constitutional Court and the judiciary in general are part of a political conspiracy to destroy him. Now, at some point, it must be his patriotic duty to adduce evidence to that point, to that effect. The alternative for him is to open himself to the accusation that he invokes the allegation against the judiciary as part of a political agenda to escape accountability. That said, I am not so naive as to believe that absence of evidence always constitutes evidence of absence. What I am saying about President Jacob Zuma is that if we limit ourselves to the four corners of the statements he has made, the evidence in support of the allegations he is making against the judiciary is a bit on the thin side. And that is why I argue that there must come a point, and that point must be soon, when he supports this allegation with evidence. But I also proceed from the attitude that the judiciary as an institution is independent. But I am not certain that the same can be said about every judge this side of heaven. But I must repeat that my own attitude notwithstanding, there is very little in the statements that have been made by Jacob Zuma against the judiciary that is supportive of my attitude. So it seems to me that until further notice, we must look at Jacob Zuma as a wily politician who understands that he's at a disadvantage in the legal terrain. And there is therefore the need for him to relocate this battle to a terrain where he is more adept, and that is the political terrain. And when you look at the high tea he had with Julius Malema, there are many ways in which you can interpret that, because we were not in the room with Julius Malema and the former president. But one of the assumptions you can make is that the former president seeks to expand his network of political support beyond the factions which support him in the ANC and beyond the ANC itself, to include the commander-in-chief of the EFF and EFF supporters. And this, if I am correct, he is doing because he's aware of something else, that the leadership ambitions of the commander-in-chief of the EFF are as hidden as the scrotum of a goat in heat. Here I'm talking about my suspicion that the commander-in-chief has presidential ambitions. And the question is, does he care how he gets to the union buildings? Whether it is through the EFF, through the ANC configured in one way or another, through or by some other means that he achieves this goal.
President Mandela was compelled to go to court, if I'm not mistaken, was found against in a court of law to say he was in violation of the Constitution. And he had to establish that same question was put to him. Do you appear in court or not? And to someone who takes an oath to say, I will defend the Constitution of the Republic and all its related laws, I thought President Mandela set the gold standard. And off he went and subjected himself to the courts. Now, President Zuma, if he takes a stance that says he's not going to follow that example, one, he's already setting an example to all citizens to say he mustn't go. No one, none of us, you and I, should never ever go to court. Frankly, you then take the sting out of the court of law. Secondly, I think there again, you know, this is not one where President Ramaphosa can sit on his hands. This is one where he has to either pronounce whether are we going to have a moment upon which we're going to take action against someone who says they are not going to obey the laws of the Republic. You know, anyone who says that, there's no status. Our Constitution is written in such a way that we all afford equal rights. And the very triumph over apartheid was that everybody was equal before the law. If Jacob Zuma tries to undermine that, not only is he undermining all the freedoms, but he's undoing the very essence of the rule of law. And I think for President Ramaphosa, if he wants to keep stability in the country, this is an opportunity to demonstrate it in the surest way imaginable. A failure to do that would literally send this country into a state upon which the rule of law is irrelevant. I happen to hold the view that the State Capture Commission is a bit like the ANC's divorce proceedings. We are all observers of a party tearing itself apart and everybody saying, he cheated on us. This one did this one did that. So I think naturally, the prosecution mustn't just sit only with President Zuma. I think all former heads of state and current ones must appear before the commission to be able to give testimony and evidence. So President Mbeki must appear, President Motlanthe must appear, and President Ramaphosa must appear.
We have a war of all against all at the State Capture Commission, where one faction of the ANC points fingers at the other faction points fingers back. But when you take a step back, what you see is this is not a question of one bad faction and one good faction in a war of good against evil. This is a question of one party that has been captured by multiple interests, and the parties and the factions that represent those interests are at war with each other. But none of them has the best interests of the country, let alone the most vulnerable in the country at heart. So far from being a war of good against evil, what's happening right now in the ANC is a war of the captured versus the more captured. So why do I say this? Well, while Molefe has successfully cast aspersions over Eskom's contract with Optimum while Ramaphosa was chair, he has not been able to explain why, when the Guptas entered the fray. Now, the Guptas bought Optimum from Glencore. And effectively, while Molefe was CEO of Eskom, he continued with the tainted contract that he criticized earlier. So why was it okay for Eskom to enter into a tainted contract with the Guptas when they owned Optimum through a company called Tegeta, but not okay when it was Ramaphosa doing it? So it seems that there are different rules depending on which faction happens to be doing the capturing. When the faction I don't like does the capturing, then I go to the State Capture Commission and point fingers. But when the faction that I support does the capturing, then I create a narrative of persecution. So what Molefe still has to answer is, if all this stuff that was happening with this Optimum and Eskom contract was so bad, why was it continued even after Ramaphosa left the fray? So Molefe has successfully implicated Ramaphosa, tainted Ramaphosa, but he has not successfully untainted himself. And I think that's what we're going to continue to see at the State Capture Commission. Believe me, the gloves are off. People are gunning for each other left, right, and center. But when you take a step back, you get a larger picture of how the ANC has been captured from multiple angles. And all these factional battles are often representations not of ideological differences, but of differences in who's been captured, when, why, and how. Of all the people involved in state capture in the ANC, very few have the unique ability to say that they have actually been on both sides of state capture, both on the side of the captors and the captured. And when I look at President Ramaphosa, he seems to have played a role in the side of the forces that were both trying to capture the ANC and the side of the ANC that was captured at the same time. And it seems to me that not since Cecil Rhodes has one person been so involved in political power and economic power at the same time.
Well, Kessler, you may be right in ways maybe you have not imagined. People accuse Cyril Ramaphosa as being spineless. And I'm one of those who have made this accusation. Hopefully, I've never made it publicly, because that would be very rude But in private conversations, I have made the accusation that one of his problems is that he is spineless. And as you speak, I'm struck by the fact that I am completely incorrect. And what you say sparks that in me, that I'm wrong. He's not spineless. He has multiple spines.
Sure.
And that is, for me, the main problem. Now, if in September 2008, those members of the ANC, NEC spoke to me during that long night, which led to the removal of Thabo Mbeki as president of the Republic. If they did not mislead me, we should be even more worried. Because what they said to me is that one of the most strident voices that night that called for the removal of Thabo Mbeki was that of Cyril Ramaphosa. And if they did not mislead me, we should be worried, very worried. And the ANC should be very worried about the extent to which his own narrow interests supersede everything.